recording so we can start whenever you are ready.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Leaders,
Here.
Schultz,
Here.
Larson,
Here.
Chapman,
Here.
and Silkworth.
Here.
All the members are present.
Thank you. We have minutes before us. If we've all read them, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I can second that. Or, go ahead.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same?
Aye.
I need to wait for that.
There's a delay.
Slight
Yeah.
delay.
That slight delay, yeah.
So then, Lynn, you're gonna have to sign that too.
Yeah, right here, I'll sign it.
Your name's on it.
Yeah, thank you.
Under control, I'm
Thank
just
you.
waiting on the official approval.
Thank you for taking care of that. All right. With that, we'll set up a motion to open a public hearing on case number ZTA 2023-02.
Do you want to read the,
And
Oh.
yes.
we need to read
I
that first.
suppose I
That's
have to
okay,
read
Dolores.
this.
No worries.
It's this long, so bear with me. This is about the public hearings. They will be conducted pursuant to the Commissioner's rules and procedures. We will first hear the report of the Planning Director on the detailed information and observations regarding the request before the Commission, if not done so in written form prior to the hearing. And next, we'll take the testimony of the applicant and his or her witnesses. Upon completion of the applicant's testimony, I will call upon members of the audience wishing to be heard concerning the request. Persons in favor of the request shall be heard first, followed by those opposed to it. At any time during the presentation of testimony, the members of the commission may interrupt to ask questions or make comments on what has been said. Upon completion of all testimony, the applicant will be allowed to make a closing statement to the commission. Upon completion of the applicant's closing statement, I will entertain a motion from the commission to close the public hearing on the request. The commission reserves the right to ask questions of any member of the audience. However, we will not hear any unsolicited statements unless the public hearing is first reopened. Each speaker addressing this commission shall step forward to the podium and state their name and address before proceeding with their testimony or evidence. This commission shall not be bound by strict rules of evidence, but does reserve the right to exclude evidence or testimony that it may deem to be irrelevant, immaterial, incompetent, or unduly repetitious. As chairman, I will rule on all questions relating to the admissibility of evidence, which may be overruled by a majority of the commission. Continuances may be granted by the commission in case for good cause shown to any interested party who has entered their appearance. The commission may request a continuance of a hearing for the purpose of giving further notice, taking further evidence, gathering further information, touring the proposed site, or for such other reasons as the commission may find sufficient. In such case, we will state the specific reasons for the continuance and set a date, time, and place when the matter will be considered. All official actions of this commission will be made at a public meeting by motion made, seconded, and a polling of the membership. If conditions are imposed, such conditions shall be included in the motion or amendment thereto. Our final decision will be prepared in writing and will be part of the public record of this commission.
I make a motion to open public hearing for case number MIS-2023-01.
We've got a motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion is carried. The public hearing is open. Would the applicant like to come
So
forward?
tonight we
or-
have the city staff here available with us. Chris Gibbons is going to give a presentation on the joint city and county land use study for you. So it's all your, Chris.
All right, thank you. Sorry if I sit over here to do the presentation, so I'll have to just turn to my left, keep looking. All right.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
I have a printout, so I can at least face you while you guys look at the screen, so. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. It's not very often where city staff comes to the County Planning Commission to make a presentation on planning matters, but tonight is one of those, and it's a very important matter. This is the culmination of about 3.5 years of work between the city, county to adopt a new set of policies for how we go about reviewing subdivision development out in our 2-mile area. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So Chapter 354 of the Iowa Code allows cities in Iowa to adopt 2-mile land use studies and policies for the growth and development within our 2-mile limit. In order to implement those policies, the state code also has a Chapter 28E that allows for cities and counties to enter into agreements for implementing those policies. Right now, we are currently working on the last update that was done in 2010. The first agreement goes back to 1995 and was updated every about 5 to 7 years thereafter, with the last update occurring in 2010. The map you see on your right is the current map that we, the city and the county, currently implement between one another. It's about 13 years old, so it's in need of an update. There's been some annexations that occur kind of south of the city and off the east side that don't really take effect in this map. But right now, there's 4 service areas. There's a city service area 1 and 2. By and large, what that means is any type of subdivision activity that happens in a city service area 1 and 2, that's these light colored areas here, this light blue, and then this purplish area is a city service area 2. You would have to annex into the city of Council Bluffs. So if you live in these areas, you want to do a lot line adjustment, you want to do a parcel split, you have to annex into the city. And if you cannot annex, then basically you're unable to do that subdivision as it stands today. And then we have county service areas 1 and 2, which by and large allow for development to occur without annexation, except that there's a situation where there may need to be an extension of infrastructure to support one of those developments. So in June, I think it was June 22nd, 2023, we had a joint city, county, planning commission, council members, board of supervisors meeting to really kind of take a deep dive into the study and to all the details of it. I'm not going to give that same presentation today, but more or less kind of quickly go over chapters 1 through 5, which really is the background analysis of the study, and then we'll talk a little more in detail about chapter 6. So chapter 1 is really just an introduction and background of the study, laid out the purpose and intent, and then discusses the planning procedures that we went through in order to come up with the policies, goals, and implementation strategies. Chapter 2 talks about a 3-mile study area. So earlier I mentioned the 2-mile limit. That's what state law allows for the city to regulate, is subdivision within 2 miles. But if you recall from that map, everything kind of drops off once you got that 2-mile limit area, and there's really no guidance as to what needs to occur after you get to that point. So as part of this study, both the city and county felt it was important to look at a study area about 3 miles out, so that as annexations occur, we have some type of idea as to what the future land uses should be in that area, as well as what the growth service area should be. And in addition to establishing a 3-mile area, we also looked at environmental and geological constraints, which have an impact on development. So we looked at floodplains, steep slopes, as well as soil suitability in those areas. And then we looked at 5 potential expansion areas that could occur on the periphery of our current municipal boundary. I won't go over all those, but you had the Southlands area here, kind of going down to Mills County, South 192nd Street area, from about this point here down to where the data centers are at, Highway 92 in the Concord Loop Road area, as well as Highway 6, I-80, and then Old Lincoln Highway kind of going northbound into Crescent. Chapter 3 of the study looked at infill sites within Council Bluffs. So there was 8 specific areas that we looked at. As part of that analysis, we primarily focus on existing infrastructure or planned infrastructure as to how those areas could be developed. That was along East Manawa Drive, Council Bluffs Country Club. We looked at the Dodge Park Golf Course, some other areas out here around Highway 6, College Road, and then also here along East Manawa Drive as part of Chapter 3. Chapter 4 of the document looked at transportation. It was really kind of high-level analysis of existing roads, conditions, traffic volumes, crash data, and how the existing transportation network kind of interacts with one another. And then Chapter 5 just looked at the historical development pattern of Council Bluffs. I mean, by and large, we've pretty much grown out in a very suburban nature towards the east side of the city. And then it looked at funding sources that could potentially be used for development if we do decide to grow out in that 2 and 3 mile area. And then it talked about sort of the financial implications of leapfrog development and how oftentimes that does require the municipal government to have to subsidize that development because it's getting out in front of existing development and where infrastructure is currently available. So when we took this project on, the city and county and the steering committee really agreed that we need to come up with a set of policies that, one, allowed for growth and development to occur, but in a way that was orderly and efficient, but also did not result in the city having to, at some point in time, annex in non-conforming development. So that was a real concerted effort by the group, and we'll start talking about the approach that we took to accomplish that. So it was a two-part approach. The first one is we wanted to establish some future land uses. And the way we did that is we looked at existing development in that area as well as potential development in that area. And then we selected terminology that was consistent between both the city and county's comprehensive plans. So rural residential, commercial, industrial, agriculture, those type of terminologies. And then we also looked at a service area, which really kind of dealt with the potential for development of parcels of land relative to infrastructure needs to support that. And then we created specific goals and policy implementation strategies for how that development could occur. We also created some definitions. So in this document, there is specific terminology that's used, and for the purpose of clarity for folks who have to implement it, but also for the public, we created some definitions. The first one being development, which that basically is pretty much any parcel of land that we're creating, or any buildable lot that's being created for any new commercial, industrial, or residential land use or structure. Then we came up with a definition for city development standards, so that as growth occurs out in that area, and it has to conform to city development standards, they would need to make sure that streets, roads, and sidewalks are being built to comply with SUDA standards, which is what our Public Works Department enforces through their code review. Title 16, our fire code, Title 13, our building and construction code, and Title 14, our subdivision ordinance. So when we say city development standards, that's what we're looking for, that development to conform to those specific chapters of our code. And then we also created a definition for something new called a homestead parcel split. So this was part of the negotiation that we had with the county about figuring out ways to allow for some development to occur without precluding the city from being able to extend infrastructure out to some of these growth areas. And a homestead parcel split was one of them. So what that is, that's a tract of land where you have an existing habitable residential use. And let's say that the farmers are retired, the kids want the house, but they don't want to farm the property. Well, under a homestead parcel split, they could subdivide out that home. That home could be on a tract of land that's no greater than 4 acres, but then the resulting tract would have to be at least 20 acres in size or greater. All right? And then we came up with the definition for a parcel, for a parent parcel, which is really just captures the tracts of land as they exist the day that City Council and the Board of Supervisors adopt this policy. So we'll take a snapshot in time of those existing parcels of land, and that is what we're now going to call parent parcels moving forward for the purpose of implementing this policy. All right. So then we looked at creating future land uses, and again, we focused on existing terminology between the city and county's plans. So a residential estate, these are going to be areas that are, primarily you can develop to a residential standard. However, they're not going to have access to sanitary sewer. You may have access to potable water, but by and large, it's probably going to be on a well and septic. And that's going to be the areas that you see here outlined in kind of this brownish looking color. All right. So kind of on the periphery of kind of the hinterland of the 2 mile area. And then residential, that's going to be geared towards any other residential uses, whether it be detached, attached, multifamily, townhomes, row homes. with the expectation that, those could potentially be serviced with water and sanitary sewer. And then they would also potentially have the opportunity to have kind of these neighborhood nodes and clusters, like a commercial node of some sort to support that residential development. And then we have commercial, industrial, and agricultural. All those are pretty straightforward. What you will see here on the map are these yellow lines. They do have purpose and meaning behind them. Those are potential extensions of the existing sanitary sewer system throughout that area. As part of this study, we did run a cost analysis, very high level, as to what it would cost to open up Pony Creek, finish serving out areas along Railroad Highway, Mosquito Creek Basin, and then Indian Creek. Total cost just to build it is about $100 million. So that would not include any cost to upgrade treatment plants or to build new treatment plants or to acquire land or easements for running those utility lines. So it's a pretty big undertaking and pretty big investment that the city would take on if we choose to go down the path to provide infrastructure utilities to open up those areas for growth. And then we came up with service areas. So right now, again, we have 4 service areas: city service area 1 and 2, county service area 1 and 2. What we did with that is we created 3 different city growth areas. Growth area 1A, which is going to be these light colored yellow areas you see here, and I'll talk in a minute about what that means. You'll also see city growth area 1B, which is more the maroon colored areas here right adjacent to our municipal boundary. City growth area 2, which is going to kind of be out in the periphery as you get more out towards like the hinterland side of the 2-mile limit. And then county, which you see out here in blue. And actually the county could extend a lot further than that, but we just kind of stopped it there at the boundary of the 3-mile limit. So as part of this study, we did create specific goals and policies and implementation strategies in order to accomplish the objectives of it. By and large, the goals for 1A, city growth area 1A, 1B, and 2 are to allow some development activity to happen, but in a way that's planned, either with immediate annexation or with an annexation agreement, but also in a way that doesn't preclude us in the future being able to extend infrastructure and grow out of those areas. Then we have a county area, so the goals and policies for that are really just to keep things rural, keep it being built towards county development standards, as that area is really unlikely ever to be annexed in the future, at least in our foreseeable future. And then we created some implementation strategies for how we can go about encouraging and allowing those different development scenarios in each one of those service areas. One of the big questions that we often get asked when it comes to subdivisions into 2-mile is, do I have to be annexed? And that was a big question that needed to be answered as part of this study as well. So when it comes to annexation, you will have to be immediately annexed if your subdivision, whether it be a parcel split, lot line adjustment, major subdivision, minor subdivision, if it accomplishes any of those 4 following. So 1, if it occurs adjacent to the city limits, you'd have to get immediately annexed. If it would connect, so if your tract of land would connect to another tract of land that's in a growth area 1A, 1B, or 2, that would have to get immediately annexed as part of that approval. If it would square off our boundary, so I'm not picking on an area, but think about the Crystal Lane area, out there on the east side of town. If it were to square off our boundary by taking one of those parcels, then that potentially would require immediate annexation. Or if it would facilitate infrastructure extensions out into the 2-mile limit area, that would require immediate annexation. Now, we understand that that is not always practicable based upon the geographic location of a property to the city's municipal boundary. So one of the flexibilities that we built into this new policy is to allow for an annexation agreement. And essentially that would be bounded to the current property owner entering into that agreement, as well as to any future successors and assigns who may purchase that property. So if you cannot get immediately annexed because you're too far out from our boundary and you don't want to have your neighbors join in the annexation, you could potentially move forward with your development, but you'd have to agree to an annexation agreement that we voluntarily, you would not protest in the future, nor would any other future successors and assigns of your property protest it. Each of those agreements, it'll kind of be customized depending on what they want to do in their location. But by and large, I think we'd probably tie it back to when infrastructure was available in that area, that you would then come into the city and connect into our system. Okay. Let's talk quickly here about the city growth area. So growth area 1A, so you can see here's kind of outlined in yellow. These are areas that by and large have already been substantially developed. There's probably not a likelihood that you're gonna see a lot of development come out of it unless somebody were to assemble some tracts of land and come in with a petition to get urban services to it, so potable water, sanitary sewer, storm sewer. This is not a priority area for us for future growth, but if it is to be annexed, we want to ensure that that development is still happening in accordance with city development standards. As far as implementation goes, so city development standards would apply. The city would let the county know when those applications have come in for our review, and they would have an opportunity to review and comment on it. Annexation would happen concurrent with individual subdivisions or as development occurs and the need for utility extensions. Again, if they cannot be immediately annexed, they do have the opportunity to go with an annexation agreement. All subdivision activity would be reviewed and approved by the City of Council Bluffs. Parcel splits would be allowed as a one-time action from a parent parcel. In a 1A, we did not assign a minimum acreage size for a parcel split because, again, most of this area by and large is already built out and developed. Homestead splits would be allowed. Property line adjustments, which do not create a buildable lot, would also be allowed, and they would be exempt from any of our annexation requirements. So, one neighbor needs to modify a property line because they built their fence over their neighbor's property, or they want to build a structure, need some extra room, they could go forward with a lot line adjustment with their neighbor without having to be annexed into the city. And then zoning will remain under the authority of Pottawattamie County in this entire 2-mile limit area. We, the city, do not have the authority to enforce zoning in that area since the county has already adopted a zoning ordinance for that area. So city growth area 1B. So this would be a priority area for the city, and by and large, this is areas that are immediately adjacent to the City Council Bluffs. Either going to have access to existing infrastructure or there's planned infrastructure that will be readily accessible to service development. Annexation would occur as subdivision or individual sites are developed. And then here, which would differ from the 1A, if you are trying to move forward with a parcel split or a subdivision, you would have to have at least essentially 21 acres in order to pull that off. So you could do an acre split to allow a home site with a septic or connect to our services, whichever. But then the remaining tract would have to be 20 acres in size. And 20 acres is a number that we felt was suitable to allow for development to occur at a density that could then offset the cost of providing urban services to it. The implementation schedule for 1B is pretty much right in line with the 1A, except here we do establish a minimum size requirement for parcel splits. And then we also, for property line adjustments, you would not be exempt from annexation as part of that. So that's kind of the two big differences between a 1A and a 1B. City growth area 2. So this is land area that's kind of in between properties that are going to be developed and then areas that are going to still remain relatively rural in nature for the foreseeable future. Some of these areas may have access to utilities, but by and large, they will not. We do still want to allow some development to occur in that time of transition, but it would need to be built to city standards so that, again, as we get out there in the future and these properties get annexed in, we're not bringing in non-conforming situations. And then as far as the implementation schedule goes, it's going to follow by and large growth areas 1A and 1B, except here, the county would be the ones reviewing parcel splits, homestead parcel splits, and sketch and property line adjustments, and then making the city aware of that prior to them granting final approval of it. So we would have an opportunity to still comment on it. And then again, zoning will continue to remain under the authority of the county. And then county development, I think that pretty much speaks for itself. That's just gonna be areas that are really kind of too far beyond the reach of the city to ever get to in the foreseeable future. That area will still by and large be, well and septics, maybe have potable water if rural water's out there, but by and large it'll be well and septics. Your transportation network is probably asphalt roads. They're not really built to a city standard. And then we do not foresee ever really bringing urban services out to those areas just because they're too far beyond our reach to do that in an economical way. So implementation would be that the county would continue to do all their reviews. You could build to county standards. We don't anticipate annexing unless there's a particular project that would require services from us. And then zoning would continue underneath the county as well. So that would pretty much function as it does today out in the county service area too, if you were to compare the two together. And then so next steps, so today we're here recommending and asking for your approval to amend your comprehensive plan to adopt the proposed 2-mile limit study and the associated 2080 agreement. Once that's complete, the city will go back and start working with planning staff at the county to establish a set of unified development standards so that as development goes in those areas, conversations can be had that lets them know that, hey, you got to build that street to SUDA standards, the sidewalks have to be built to SUDA standards, lot sizes need to be comparable to cities' requirements, and we'll work to establish an appropriate set of standards for that. The city is also going to undertake a sanitary sewer study of the 2-mile area to determine which areas are feasible to be serviced and perhaps which ones there's really not enough cost benefit there to extend infrastructure into. One area that comes to mind is as you go north out on Railroad Highway. Right now we have that as a growth area too. It's possible that may change based upon the outcome of that sanitary sewer study. We may find out that it's going to cost $30 million to run sewer up there. We're trying to get 200 houses out of it. Those type of decisions would lead us to say, maybe that area is better as a 1A or a county development area. And then once that sewer study is done, we'll go back, look at our future land use plans with the county, and then we'll come back with a recommendation on how to amend our future land use plans out in the 2-mile area. So that's kind of gives you an idea of what those next steps will be. Timing wise, I'm not quite sure yet when that sanitary sewer study will be done, but we'll continue to keep Matt and Pam abreast of how it's moving along.
Real important pieces that came out of this area that we really want to make sure we work well with the city on is the protection of those drainage basins for future extension of services. I mean, you hear the costs, and those are just high level costs out there of $100 million of potentially what that would cost to run sanitary sewer in that district. If we don't get a certain level of density of housing in there, or for the city, it's going to be one of those things that no one's going to be ever able to afford to have that sewer put in there. So I do think that we've learned a lot through this study process, and some really good things have come out of it. And it's going to be a much clearer path for all the residents when they come in to talk to either the city or they come to talk to us. We're both speaking the same language. It's real clear cut policies and procedures for us, and we're going to continue to grow those with unified development standards. And so I think it'll be a good benefit for the residents as they come in, wanting to know what they can do with their land. And that annexation piece, is just really important. I mean, we have to start really focusing on how do we get these people annexed into the city, whether it's the city of Council Bluffs or even the small communities, and start pushing that development into those communities. It's the only place you're going to get affordable housing is in those communities. And these annexation pushes will really help out just to get it where it needs to be.
Okay, so explain to me, so if this board moves this on to the Board of Supervisors, and then the Board of Supervisors approves it, then what has to happen with the city? Is the city council, does it have to go through the same process over there, or do you guys have your own? I guess I'm just trying to figure out how this all
We're running them
gets
simultaneously.
Okay.
So That's why we held the joint meeting between the city council, mayor, board of supervisors, planning commissions, all came together to really kind of get the whole big in-depth view of it. And then right after that, it was like, okay, now let's move it on to Pot County Planning Commission, City Planning Commission, individually, and city councils and board of supervisors for adoption of it.
The planning commission has already reviewed this, they reviewed this on August 8th, and they did recommend approval.
Okay.
So then Pot
So you're a
County
little
Planning
bit ahead
Commission
of
was
us over
next in
there.
line.
What's that?
We're just really kind of following the dates in the calendar. So-
Right.
So city planning commission happened first, then county planning commission, next it'll be city council, and then the day thereafter will be the board of supervisors.
Okay.
Reviewing the land use study and the 2080 agreement.
And the city attorney, it's gone through the city attorney for the 2080 agreement, and it's been through the county attorney as well for the 2080 agreement. They're in agreement on it.
Okay.
And so once that's signed, then the city clerk, I'll work with Jody, the city clerk, and then we'll get that recorded with the Secretary of State.
Okay.
I got a question for you. So the existing developments out there, that's 10 years, 20 or 30 years old, that's
Yeah.
like, for instance, Bentry, so within that 2-mile radius, that falls in that. So theoretically, what's the criteria for annexation of Bentry into the city? Can't read that.
So Bentry's it's in that.
So Venture would be a 1A area.
So it won't be able to?
Well, I won't say it will never be annexed, it's just not a priority area for us to annex, that's already built out and developed. So unless they were to come forward with another, subdivision phase.
Like the north side of Bentry?
Right, so that, that phase would require the city to review it, and then potentially they would need to enter into an annexation agreement because they can't get immediately annexed, they're not adjacent to our boundary.
So here's a question for you. So let's say hypothetically, you have that annexation, Bentry, your taxes will almost double, property taxes.
When you get annexed. but-
Yeah, I mean, like, for instance, my taxes are $7,500 a year. Take that times 2.
But we're not
I know, I'm just
We're not
saying,
talking about,
property tax.
we're not talking about coming in and annexing Bentry.
But I'm just
It's
saying,
Bentry's.
theoretically, you could though, right, down the road?
Well, yeah, I mean, it could happen today if that phase wanted to get opened up and they were asking for city sewer. If we're gonna drag sewer out there, we're gonna wanna annex you in. But
Okay,
we're not actively seeking annexations, it's just as development occurs out there, then at that point, you would have to discuss with the city, hey, we wanna do this next phase. We would go through, there's a matrix that we would kind of walk down and follow, that was should be in your packet. And if it requires immediate annexation, we likely couldn't get to them, so we do a delayed annexation agreement with them on it.
but like, in order to annex it, city sewer, city water has to
It'll
be, or
negotiated as part of that agreement, like what that triggering mechanism would be.
for that whole development?
Correct.
So, hey, Chris, this is Justin Schultz on the
Right,
phone.
I'm talking about.
It's like
the new
Omaha,
phase.
you never know.
That's not what he's talking about.
I'm talking about the new phase, not the.
Right, but I was just in general, but it could
You guys
happen.
hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you,
Can
Justin.
you?
Hey, Chris, I had a question. I guess, just kind of in that same vein, that Brett's kind of talking with the, some of that annexation. I mean, I completely understand this stuff because we want to get away from having, I call it the mistakes of my grandfather and, the Duggins and guys like that back in the day when they kind of checkerboard city, county all over, Lewis Central District over there. But, I guess I want to know, are things going to be contingent on those services? And you mentioned there's an agreement, right? Like, oh, well, if that's part of your annexation agreement, then fine. But I guess what I'm worried about is ending up with more Indian Hills Road type situations with these annexations. So you're going to get that tax, but you're not going to be able to provide that service. And I guess are there ways to make it contingent on that? Are there ways to make exemptions from even, you talked about some of these agreements with these new developments in that 2 miles. Is there any kind of process for not having to go down that annexation path or like an exemption of some kind?
If you're in a county development area, but by and large, if you're in a 1A, 1B, or 2, in most situations, I mean, it will likely trigger annexation, and then you're either gonna get immediately annexed, or you're gonna go through an agreement. Now, there's some exceptions to that, like in a 1A, if you want to do a lot line adjustment with your neighbor, that's fine, that's not gonna require any annexation, but if you're trying to develop new subdivisions in that 2 mile, then yes, that will trigger annexation. And then the terms of that agreement, I mean, I think are gonna be negotiated based upon where you're at and what your development looks like. It's hard for me to say
Yeah.
today that it's just gonna be triggered by infrastructure alone, because, I mean, even when the city annexes you, if we can't provide you sewer, we still provide you other services as well. You know, police, fire, things of that nature that have a cost associated with it.
Yeah, no, and I'm not knocking any of that. I'm just, I'm using that as an example because that just seems to be one of the complaints you see a lot. But I'm looking down like roads like Pioneer Trail, for example, where there's a development that because of where Google's located and because of the way the city line goes down Highway 275 or 196th Street there, whatever, it's created a situation where your 2-mile radius is not as really a circle as you'd think, so there's a lot of potential for development up Woodland Trail, a lot of it up Pioneer Trail, and now all of a sudden we're going to be faced with some of these, annexation type issues, and I'm just a little concerned about that because I feel like it's going to scare some developers away from even wanting to mess with it.
And people.
I think it'll be,
Well-
I think we might get a little bit of the opposite from that though, Justin. I think it might be clearer for them when they're out looking at ground to say, okay, I'm gonna be able to, cause the city standard part of it, where they're talking about the roads and, the SUDA standards, we've already adopted those same standards. So they're looking at that cost part of it already, and I think it's gonna wind up just being a little bit clearer for them on that part of it to help the developments out versus being a deterrent.
So the,
Sure. And I guess, so the question too, Chris, is just, you mentioned the other services. I mean, are you guys, you as a city, prepared to expand on, police, fire, those kind of things? I mean, do you guys have some of that plan in place to follow this program, the land use plan? I mean, so for example, if you put in like 200 homes off Highway 92 in your 2-mile district or something, are your police and fire able to maintain that? I mean, are your services going to be tailored to this as well?
I mean, that goes to already our typical review process. When subdivisions come in, we send it out to the fire department, police department, and they have an opportunity to respond to that, if they can, service the calls out there or not. So I would foresee that we would treat this type of development the same way, that it would go through that same city review process, and those departments would have an opportunity to, comment on that. I'll just say that, no, we have not done an analysis of our fire and police departments, capacity to service this area. I mean, right now, we're really just trying to get new policies, goals, and implementation strategies in place so that, we can deal with current development trends and needs and not on kind of this antiquated process of annex now or don't do anything at all.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Thank you.
so question for you. So there's a development in the works, not approved, right? South of Google, the one you've been talking about for the last few years.
South of Google.
Right.
Well,
Right.
Heartland Heights, they're talking about. Heartland
John
Heights.
Jerkovich is,
Oh,
so let's say,
Off of
we
Pioneer Trail.
implement this plan, we approve it, and then this development then finally goes through to get approved in development. Since Google's within the city boundary, you have authority over that 2-mile zone, so therefore you would be,
it's in a county development area.
Yeah, that's outside the area, and that's not in there.
oh, it's outside the area?
Yeah.
In the 2-mile zone?
No, it's in the 2-mile zone. It's in a county development area.
So that will always be excluded, is what you're saying?
It won't always be excluded because it's just
For
as
today.
this map is a living document,
Okay.
right?
It
So
can change.
as the city expands out, then the potential for those development areas to change out are there as well too.
Uh-huh.
So what may be a county development area right now, if a big project or something like that were to come in, that could quickly change into, hey, we're gonna change this map, it's gonna go into a city development area too.
And they're gonna get
priority area
annexed
for them.
in, right?
And they're gonna get annexed
Okay.
in on that because it really is, because as all of our jobs,
Sure.
we don't know what the next developer is or, economic development person is that's gonna walk in, and they've already been out site selecting, they already know what pieces of ground they've had, they may have referenced some of our maps, they may not have, they may have just what they feel like the company came in, feels like they found the perfect piece of ground, so they're coming to us and they're like, hey, what would it take for, we're gonna, this is what we wanna do there, we know that it's gonna need rezoned, and we're gonna wanna split it up into this many pieces, and they have all these different criteria set out. We may look at this really quick, call up the city and say, hey, there's this person coming in wanting to do this style of thing, really gonna be more suitable for what goes in the city. They may already come in and demand, hey, we want city water, we want city sewer there to do this, and they know that they gotta pay for it and all of this part of it. So all of those situations are potential to come up during this process.
But you mentioned lot size too, right? You said that? So isn't there a state law regulating the size of the lot for the county, like a 2 acre minimum or 1 acre minimum in order to build?
We have.
Or do we have the authority to reduce that less than 1 acre for a development?
We wouldn't, that's just the county, that's in the county subdivision ordinance. Our minimum lot size, if there's water there, is 1 acre.
Okay.
If there's not water, then it's 2 acres.
Okay,
So, in that area where there's no lot size delineated out in there, it'd be the same. If there's water there, you can
1
have a
acre.
potential 1 acre spot. If there's not water there, then you're gonna be at a 2 acre spot. Or unless, now if you're automatic annexation into the city, well then it's up to the city on what their minimum lot size is that they wanna put on that.
But let's just say somebody wanted to come in here with
oh, I get you,
a 50 lot subdivision in that
Right.
area,
Within that zone,
within this area. So this is an area that the city does have an interest in.
Okay.
As a growth area, because we have the potential to run a sanitary sewer line up that Pointy Creek Basin and really open it up. Well, if you're right in this location here, you're nowhere near the city's municipal boundary, like we can't get to you, and the likelihood of you getting 7 neighbors to join the annexation is probably, slim to none.
Okay.
So what they would do is they would approach the city with their development. Because this is an area that we do foresee growing into, we would then tell them, okay, well, you need to establish lot sizes, you need to build roads, you need to build sidewalks that conform to city standards. And what that's probably gonna force some people to do is not be able to go with just septic systems. They may have to put in a package treatment plant in that development to service those lots until such time we get sewer out there. And then when sewer comes out there, that package treatment plant goes away, and then they connect right to our system, so that, again, we're not bringing in kind of substandard development into the city.
so within that 2 mile, just to summarize, 2 mile zone, if it's a new development and it falls in that color coded jurisdiction, that the city and county both then would have, what do you call it? Need approval for that development to go in based on whatever the criteria is of this
Except for
plan.
that blue area. The blue area, the city's basically said, you know what, just build that to a rural development standard. Like, we're not gonna get out there in the foreseeable future. Just continue to do acreage lot developments. We're
Okay.
fine with that.
I get you.
It's just when you start getting into, the 1A, or sorry, the 1B, this is a priority area. If you look at those parcels, all that's immediately adjacent to our boundary. By and large, we do have infrastructure out there, or could easily extend it without doing a main trunk extension. So we would want that annexed in immediately. Or if you're in a 1A, if you're able to, to somehow, get out here and assemble, a couple of 100 acres, and you wanna do a 100 acre or 100 lot subdivision, then we would want that built to a city standard, so that when it eventually does get annexed in, we're not taking a bunch of non-conforming situations.
Okay.
Or rights of way that really can't even be improved to a city standard in the future, even if we wanted to, because they're so narrow in width. We can't put in 26-foot wide streets with sidewalks on both sides. It's just not practical, because the right of way that was platted was only for 30 feet in width. That's what we want to try to avoid. And I think the policies, implementation strategy we have set up allow for that to occur, and it'll be a negotiation with the developer, as part of that.
Okay.
It'll just be a cost of doing development out in an area which isn't ready yet to be developed.
Okay, thanks.
So talk a little bit about extending water services, or what has been discussed or studied, or
We could talk for hours on water services about what's been discussed and studied. What we know is that, Council Bluffs Waterworks has a really good hold on their system and operates within most of the they would operate most of everything within the 2 mile limit that they could get to on there. Other than that, it's rural water. We've been dealing with rural water now for about the same timeline, a little over 3 years on there. And, they are a very different kind of entity out there. They're on their own. They have an appointed board that seems to be who's ever lucky that day. And you get to go sit on the board for rural water. And, they are operating at their max bandwidth almost every time. So right now, our rural water services is trying to run a main trunk line from the Sue Johnson Tower, which sits out by Bentry off Highway 6, all the way up through Minden to catch into their system because they're borderline not able to support the customer base that they have. They're running themselves out of water on there. Their wells aren't producing enough, and so they're gonna buy bulk water from Council Bluffs and ship up through Minden to supply back to their Avoca and their systems all along through there. And so it would not surprise me to see within a couple of years that there be some changes in the state legislature on this rural water districts that are out there to see it become more of a county appointed enterprise. Like the Council Bluffs Water Works is an enterprise system that the mayor appoints people to, I believe, right? And I would see it operating in a fashion more like that because I think on the eastern side of the state, or maybe even it's either on the eastern side or middle of the state, there is a big rural water district that went bankrupt out there. And so if you look at the number of people that those systems supply, to one day have them not being supplied from that so it's questionable right now. It's a big challenge to supply that water out there.
I think to your point though, is water is so much less expensive that it really isn't as, it's not as hot button issue. You can extend water reasonably easy, whereas with sewer, you might have to have lift stations, you have to have treatment plants, you have to have significantly larger infrastructure commitments. Water at this point, Waterworks will tell you, we don't have a problem. We have unlimited water. It's a non-issue for us.
But you mentioned something about within the 2 mile limit, Council Bluffs Water Works is looking to extend in that area or serve that area or?
They do serve that area by agreement. They have so they have an agreement with rural water that sets boundaries on who supplies what. And that's an agreement between the two water districts.
But by and large, CV Waterworks is out in that 2 mile area. That's who really serves. If you have potable water in 2 mile area, it's CV Waterworks.
Like Bentry has it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just pay
But
out
there's
for
lots
it.
of subdivisions and lots of areas that don't have,
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, it's only well.
it's only well water.
Yes.
Does the city limits, Council Bluffs, does it come within 2 miles of Mills County? I know it goes down there quite a ways. I'm just curious, do you guys have an agreement like this with Mills County then, or is it just such a little segment that you?
Yeah, I mean, that's really, we're talking about that Southlands area, kind of
Right.
goes from here down to the interchange. We don't have an agreement with them. I would foresee that not taking place unless there's a project that's gonna kind of drive the city to extend sewer down there. Otherwise, I don't really foresee us approaching with a 2 mile limit agreement.
I was just curious.
It could wind up, Council Bluffs very well could wind up in a situation much like the city of Shelby is at some point in time, where the city
Right,
of Shelby
where you
is
get a
annexed
development that
into.
comes and then
Yeah.
deal with it then? Okay.
Other questions for city staff?
Good.
Any other questions from us? Justin, do you have anything more?
No, I guess I just want to, just send a thank you to, everyone over there, especially, this has been a long time in the making. I was on the county board at the time that we, commissioned this project. And I know, between Brandon, Courtney, Chris, Matt, Pam, a bunch of you, there's several of you that were involved in kind of bringing this thing over the finish line. So I just, want to recognize and say thank you for it. I know there's been a lot of thought and efforts put into this, so thank you all. Seriously, it's gonna be a big deal, and you know, it's gonna shape the future of our county and city. So, thanks again.
Okay. Let's see, do we close the public hearing?
Don't we need to ask for
Oh, any opposite?
in favor or against?
Do we have anybody who wants to speak in favor or against it? I don't know a couple of you folks, so I'm not.
I'm Susan Miller. I'm on the County Board of Supervisors, and
Ah.
I wasn't at the meeting in June when this was discussed originally, so I came for the course tonight, so I can hear it all firsthand.
Very good. Very good. All right. I'm asking for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion and second it.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, public hearing has been closed. What kind of discussion
I'm gonna
did
take
any
the
of our
vote.
members?
You gotta vote for the motion.
You gotta vote for the motion.
Oh, vote for the motion.
Yes.
Close public hearing.
All right.
Aye.
All
Aye.
in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion to close is approved. All right, discussion from our members, or is there anything from the county that you would like to share, or that you haven't already done so?
Not that we haven't already discussed on there.
Okay, very good.
I make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Motion and approval. Roll call.
Chapman?
Yes.
Silkworth?
Yes.
Larson?
Yeah.
Schultz?
Aye.
Leaders?
Yes.
All right. Motion's been approved.
Motion to adjourn.
Other
Nope, not
business?
yet. I have other business for you. Thank you all.
What do you got
Appreciate
for
it.
us, Matt?
It's got a long
Thanks,
list.
It
everybody.
wasn't on our agenda.
So, I was just giving this informational purposes for you. We've
Thank
talked,
you.
we have talked about the new,
Wind energy.
solar and wind ordinances that we have contracted with Beard Home to help us update what we have on the books right now. This is the draft of what they sent over for us. And so to give you kind of a schedule of events on what we want to do here with these is, I'm giving you this information now. The next month, on the 18th, we are going to hold a joint meeting between the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Our goal would be to leave the Planning Commission meeting that night with a recommendation for the Board of Supervisors to approve and adopt the new solar sections and the new wind sections for that. And then 2 weeks later, we would then go to the Board of Supervisors and they would adopt these as well, based on recommendations for it. But I wanted to give them to you tonight because obviously there's a lot of reading there. We'll also send them to you in electronic version, so you have them in electronic version as well. At the top of it, you'll notice the zoning districts and the proposed, they want to put them in. Like, we'll just take the wind energy system one, for example, right? At the top of the page, you see zoning districts. They have the number at which it would fall under conditional uses, and then the addition of it, wind energy systems subject to it. That is just where it would fall at in our current zoning ordinance, okay? Then you get into the meat of it, which would be add new definitions, and then the wind energy section after that. But since there's a lot of information there, I wanted to give it to you plenty far ahead of time to give you a chance to read it over, add any questions, comments, send them to me whenever they pop into your mind about it. And that way, hopefully when we come in for the meeting on the 18th, then we can have a good discussion over the final version of it and move it forward.
Matt, can I add that we have existing wind ordinance, so this would be updating what we currently have. And we worked with the attorney that wrote the ordinance for Mills County, because Mills County does not have a wind turbine ordinance currently or a solar. And we just thought it was important that we kind of work together with what Mills County's already established.
So this come from that attorney that's working with Mills County, is that who it came from?
Correct.
Okay.
And Adams County is doing the same thing.
And who, is this, I mean, is this firm, is that kind of what they do?
That was kind of the benefit of working with Beard Home, is that they work on both sides. So they work representing, green energy companies, and they also work representing municipalities. So I believe what we have presented here is both fair to the landowners and is fair to the developers coming in.
And where are they located at, where are they,
They're in Omaha,
they're in Omaha?
yeah,
So they're local.
they are local, yes. And David Levy and Lee Greenwald will be at the September meeting. They asked about coming tonight, and I said not to worry about it, because I was just gonna present you with some information, and that we would discuss it in further detail on that meeting, so.
So besides Mills County, have they done any other counties that are close in the area, like in
Did
Nebraska?
not ask.
You didn't ask?
I didn't.
Okay, I'm just curious if maybe there was,
Mills County gave them a really good, thing. Everybody seems to be happy with what they've come up with Mills County for solar, so I'm like, hey, sounds,
it's fine, I'm just curious,
So we
if
have a
they're
height-
out of Omaha, you'd think maybe they would have done Douglas County and Sarpy or something over there, maybe, possibly.
could be.
Any height restrictions we're looking at,
Uh,
suggesting?
no,
Okay.
Setbacks are,
setbacks were,
3 times the total height, the closest exterior wall, the occupied, non-participating dwelling.
right, so.
Is that it for new business?
That is it for other business.
Somebody
yes.
make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn, or you just did.
No, you did.
No, why
I'll
did you-
second.
You did it.
I'll second, nope,
Okay.
you did it.
There we go,
I'll
we got a second.
I'll second, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Sorry I couldn't be there.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.